My parents stood in my kitchen, smiling, telling me they were selling the country farm my grandfather left me, so my brother could have a city apartment for his new wife. Like my life, my roots, my memories didn't matter. I didn't argue. But I sold it first. And when Dad broke in a week later, he had no idea who the buyer really was. Before we dive in, what time are you listening to this, and where are you? Drop a comment below. I want to know if you've ever been pushed to draw a line your own family swore you'd never cross. The morning started the way I like it best. Quiet, green, and slow. Dew clung to the grass like a second skin. The old oak behind the porch gave a soft shiver, throwing shade over the steps where I sat with coffee and the brass key to the farmhouse turning in my palm. Cut hay sweetened the air. A wind chime, 3 tin spoons my grandfather wired together, clicked in a lazy rhythm. He called this place a promise, not a property. "Land remembers who kept it alive," he used to say, handing me that key as if it were a vote of confidence. I walked the fence line, checked the latch on the pasture gate, and ran my hand along weathered rails, smoothed by decades of cattle noses and human hands. The house still wore its original paint in stubborn patches. Nothing fancy, everything earned. I was lining up my day, emails to farmers I consult for, a noon call about soil tests, when gravel popped on the driveway. The family pickup turned in like it owned the road. Dad took the wheel hard. Mom's hands folded tight in her lap. My brother swung out of the back seat in a crisp button-down he never wears outside a showroom. No call, no warning, just boots on my porch, the wind chime tagging each footstep. Dad didn't bother with hello. "We need to sell the farm," he said, like he was telling me to bring in groceries. "Your brother's wedding is in 6 weeks. He needs a place in Louisville." Orvin smiled like a man measuring curtains. "We found a condo near the stadium. Great light, parking too." I set my cup down so I wouldn't throw it. "Granddad left this to me, in writing, you both know that." "Family means sacrifice," Dad answered, jaw tight. "You don't have a husband, you don't have kids. What do you need all this for? Your brother's starting a family. That's where the home should go." Mom's eyes slid to mine and away again. Not a word. Not even my name. The chime tapped the doorframe, tap tap, as if someone were trying to knock, but didn't dare. "This isn't a joint asset," I said. "It's my inheritance. The will is clear." Orvin laughed under his breath. "You've been sitting on this place like it's a trophy. Let it do some good." "It already does," I said. "It anchors me. It honors him." Dad lifted his chin, the way he does right before he makes a thing final. "We've talked to people. There's interest. Be cooperative, and it goes smoothly." My heartbeat thudded in my ears. "You talk to people? About selling what isn't yours?" Mom flinched. Dad didn't. "Don't make this ugly, Talira." It already felt ugly. A hot, pricking shame crawled up my neck, even though I'd done nothing wrong. I could feel my grandfather in every board of the porch, in every nail he pounded with those broad, steady hands. I could feel how quickly a family can strip a person out of her own life. Orvin drifted toward the barn like he'd been invited to tour it. I followed, because if I didn't, he'd open drawers and help himself. Inside, the air held the clean scent of straw and mineral oil. He traced a finger across my grandfather's workbench, then turned. "Just sign the papers," he said low. "Don't force Dad to do this the hard way." "The hard way?" I asked. "He can make things happen," Orvin said, casual as weather. "You know he can." "There's no reason to drag your feet. You mean threaten me in my own house?" I stepped closer so he had to meet my eyes. "You're not going to bully me off my land." His smile thinned. "You call it your land. Grandma called it the family's. There's a difference." He tipped his head at the rafters. "Besides, it's not like you're here every week. Let it go to someone building something." "I am building something," I said. "It's called a life." He rolled a shoulder. "Then be a team player. You can keep the old tractor if that helps you feel included." That one stung. "Included," I repeated, and let the word sit there between us like a pile of nails. From the doorway, Dad's voice carried into the barn. "We're not staying long. Bring your mother her purse." Orvin brushed past me, satisfied like he'd left a mark. Back on the porch, Dad pointed at the fields like an auctioneer. "Appraisers say this whole stretch is worth more than you think. Timing is good." "Don't drag this out." "Say what you mean, Dad," I said. "You've already made calls. You've treated this as done." He didn't deny it. Mom finally spoke, a whisper slipping past the rules of our house. "It would keep peace," she said. "You know how your father gets when things drag on." A cold piece of truth landed between my ribs. Keeping peace had always meant I gave way, and the men got to feel right. Peace isn't the same as fairness, I said. Dad's jaw ticked. We'll give you till Friday to be reasonable. I let them leave. I didn't trust my voice not to crack, and I refused to give them the performance they were baiting me for. The truck's engine grumbled down the lane, and then it was just wind and birds and the distant hum of a mower 2 farms over. I stood in the kitchen where my grandmother taught me how to cut biscuits without twisting the cutter, because twisting makes them rise lopsided. I picked up the brass key and pressed it into my palm until it left a dent. When I opened my hand, the mark looked like a small moon. The chime on the porch drifted a few soft notes, and I could see my grandfather standing in the doorway, cap tilted back, a line of sun across his cheek. Land remembers who kept it alive, he told me the summer I turned 12, when he let me drive the old truck in the lower field. It remembers who tried to sell it too. That memory hit like a hand on my shoulder, steadying, not pushing. My phone buzzed with a calendar reminder for a client call, for the normal life I've built off this land and the work it taught me to do. I silenced it and watched dust swim in a bright square of light on the kitchen floor. I knew what I was going to do. Not yell, not beg, not explain myself into exhaustion. I was going to draw a line and stand on my side of it. If they wanted a sale, they could try to sell smoke. This ground was not leaving my name without my hand lifting the pen. I hung the key back on its nail and locked the door. The chime tapped twice, as if to say, go on, but keeping the farm would mean burning every bridge I had left in my family. 2 mornings after that shouting match in the driveway, I was sitting at the kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee gone lukewarm, when I noticed a shadow flicker across the porch. By the time I stood, the only thing left was a thick manila envelope tucked neatly under the door. My stomach tightened. Nobody slid good news under your door. I picked it up, felt the stiff weight of paper inside, and tore the flap open. Right at the top, formal lettering, Mr. Keating's law office. The words, Notice of Intended Sale, jumped off the page like they'd been written in red. It claimed that the family had reached an agreement to sell the property and that I had 10 days to vacate or sign my consent. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at the date, the legal jargon, the signature at the bottom. My pulse thudded in my ears. I'd grown up believing that a person's home was theirs until they chose otherwise. Now, my own blood was trying to scrub me out of the picture with a sheet of paper. I grabbed my phone and punched in Darvin's number before I could think. He picked up on the second ring. I got your little notice, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. We're doing what's best for the family, he replied, smooth as oil. Don't fight this, Talira. Just sign, take the offer, and move on. In the background, Orvin's voice floated through, dripping with smugness. Tell her she can keep the old tractor if she signs. Might make her feel better. My hand clenched around the phone. You think this is about a tractor? That land is mine as much as it is yours. Darvin sighed like I was a child having a tantrum. Not worth dragging this out. You'll just make it harder on yourself. Then the line went dead. By noon, the walls of my kitchen felt too close. I took the keys from the hook, slid into the truck, and drove the dusty road into town. The air was thick with late summer heat, and every mile felt heavier than the last. Mr. Keating's office sat wedged between the hardware store and a barber that hadn't changed its sign since the 70s. He greeted me with the same polite smile he'd used at every church fundraiser. But when I sat down and laid the notice on his desk, that smile stayed fixed. I'm acting in everyone's best interest here, he said, folding his hands. It's a fair price. You could start fresh somewhere else. While he talked, his eyes kept drifting. Not to me, but to a file sitting on the corner of his desk. The label, in bold black letters, Orvin, Property Acquisition. My skin prickled. He wasn't some neutral third party. He'd already chosen his side. Best interest, I repeated, standing. Funny how that always seems to mean whatever suits Orvin. The ride home was quieter than the one into town. No radio, no wind through the open window, just the steady hum of tires on gravel. Back at the farmhouse, I went straight to my grandfather's old desk. The wood was worn smooth where his hands used to rest. I unlocked the top drawer, pulled out a bundle of papers tied with fraying twine. Deeds, tax receipts, the will. I could almost hear Elias's voice. Always know the worth of what's yours before you let anyone else touch it. As the sun dipped behind the barn, turning the fields gold, I sat there reading line after line, making sure I understood every clause, every signature. This was my ground to stand on, and I wasn't about to let them bulldoze it without a fight. By the time the crickets started their night chorus, I had a plan forming, not one I'd share with a soul under this roof. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. "Hey," I said when my old college friend in Louisville answered. "I need to sell something." Quietly, call set off a chain of events my family could never undo. 4 days later, I found myself in Louisville, slipping into a small cafe tucked on the corner of a busy downtown street. It was late afternoon, the kind of day where the air outside clung to you, but inside, the hum of quiet conversation and the hiss of the espresso machine felt almost calming. I'd arrived early on purpose, needing a moment to steady my thoughts before she came. Maxine Holler walked in right on time, still with that same quick, confident stride I remembered from college. She spotted me, gave a warm but assessing smile, and slid into the seat across from mine. "It's been a long time, Talira," she said, setting her bag down. "You look like someone with a lot on her mind." "You're not wrong," I replied, wrapping both hands around my coffee cup like it might keep me grounded. She wasted no time. "You said it's land in Rowan County." "Farm property?" Her voice was businesslike, but there was a spark of interest in her eyes. "Farm, plus the original house my grandfather built. It's been in my family for generations," I explained, careful to keep my tone even. "Good soil, creek access, barns still in decent shape. You'd have room for livestock if you wanted it." Maxine leaned back, considering. "I've been looking for a place to retire to in a few years, something away from the city, with history. But why are you offering it to me directly?" The question brought back a memory so fast it made me smile despite myself. Late nights in our old economics class, helping her untangle formulas and case studies when half the room had already written her off. She'd been one of the few people who treated me like I belonged there. "You remember that term paper you nearly failed?" I said quietly. She chuckled. "The one you basically saved for me." "I still owe you for that." "Well," I said, leaning in, "I'm calling in the favor. The property is mine under my grandfather's will, but my family is trying to force me into a sale that would hand it to my brother. I want you to buy it instead, quietly. No public listing, no announcements, not until the ink is dry." Her brow furrowed. "You're serious?" "As a heart attack," I said. "This way, I keep it out of their hands, and you get what you've been looking for." For a moment she was silent, weighing me with that sharp gaze. Then she reached into her bag, pulled out a slim folder, and set it on the table. "I keep a few preliminary agreements with me. Comes with the job." I felt a rush of relief, and something sharper, when she uncapped her pen. She signed with a steady hand, then slid the page toward me. My own fingers trembled slightly as I slipped it into my folder, tucking it between other documents like it was something fragile and alive. "You've got yourself a deal," Maxine said. "But you'd better be ready for the fallout when they find out." "I've been ready for years," I answered, though my pulse betrayed me. We parted outside with a quick hug and a promise to keep in touch about the next steps. The late-day sun cast long shadows on the pavement as I started toward my truck. That's when I saw it, across the street, a pickup I recognized immediately. It belonged to one of Darvin's closest drinking buddies, the kind of man who never went anywhere without reporting back. He wasn't looking directly at me, just leaning on the hood like he had nowhere else to be. But I could feel the weight of being noticed. My steps quickened. I didn't break into a run, but I didn't stop until I was in the driver's seat with the doors locked. As I pulled into traffic, I checked the rear view. The pickup stayed where it was, but my gut told me this wasn't the last time I'd see it. That night I got a text from an unknown sender. "Nice try. We know what you're doing." I sat there for a moment after reading that text, my thumb hovering over the screen like I might somehow undo it by not moving. The hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen was the only sound in the house. My laptop was still open on the bed beside me, the contract folder resting on top of it, right where I'd left it after getting home from meeting Maxine. The words glowed on the screen, short, deliberate, and heavy. "Nice try. We know what you're doing." I locked the phone, set it face down, and forced myself to take a slow breath. My mind was already moving faster than my pulse. If they'd figured out I was making a move, then someone had been watching me closely enough to catch more than just coincidence. 2 minutes later, the phone buzzed again. This time the message was colder. "This won't end well for you." My throat tightened, but I didn't respond. I'd learned long ago that engaging only fed them more fuel. Instead, I got up, crossed the room, and switched on the small lamp by the window. The light spilled across the edge of the curtain, showing the faint reflection of my own tense face in the glass. The phone rang. The name on the screen, Darvin. I considered ignoring it, but the part of me that wanted to hear exactly what he thought he knew won out. I answered without a greeting. He didn't waste time. Dad came across some paperwork tonight. Interesting stuff. Looks like you've been busy. His voice had that smug tilt I knew too well, the one he used when he thought he had the upper hand. Then you already know it's my business, I said evenly. He laughed, low and sharp. We'll be taking control one way or another, Talira. You can either save yourself the trouble or keep playing games. But you know how this ends. I let the silence stretch just long enough to make him wonder if the line had dropped. You should stop assuming you know the ending, I said finally. That a threat? He asked, tone turning hard. It's advice. He exhaled through his nose, an old tell that meant I'd gotten under his skin. Don't make us come down there. The line went dead before I could reply. I stood still, phone in hand, feeling the weight of those words settle like damp concrete. Then, through the thin curtains, a wash of light swept across the room. Headlights. Slow. Deliberate. I stepped to the side, peering from the edge without touching the fabric. A pickup idled at the curb, engine low and steady. I didn't need to see the driver to know it wasn't a coincidence. My fingers moved on their own, sliding the deadbolt into place, checking the back door, turning the latch on every window. I'd done it all 100 times before, but tonight every click sounded louder. Back in the bedroom, I pulled the folder from the nightstand drawer. The papers felt heavier than they should have. I carried them to the kitchen, opened the freezer, and slid the folder under the bag of frozen vegetables I kept for sprained wrists and stubborn migraines. It wasn't perfect, but it would buy me time if someone decided to get bold. Leaning against the counter, I whispered into the stillness. You want to fight? Fine. The truck outside revved once, then pulled away slow enough for me to hear the crunch of its tires on the gravel at the edge of the street. I didn't sleep much that night. Every small sound, a branch brushing the siding, the clunk of the ice maker, felt magnified. I kept my shoes by the bed and my phone charging within reach. By the time the sky started to pale, my body was running on coffee and adrenaline. 6 a.m. The pounding on my door rattled the whole frame. I was still in my robe, hair pulled back in a loose tie, when I heard my mother's voice from the porch. Talira, please, come to the community hall. Let's talk like family. Her tone was soft, almost pleading, but I could hear something rehearsed beneath it, like she'd been coached on what to say. My gut tightened. Still, I dressed quickly, grabbed my keys, and headed out. The morning air was cool and still. As I drove past the farm's fence line, the porch wind chime barely stirred, making a faint, tinny sound that pulled me straight back to childhood summers. It should have been comforting, but all it did was remind me how much had changed. When I pulled up to the community hall, there were already a dozen cars parked out front. The old building smelled faintly of coffee and dust when I walked in. Folding chairs had been arranged in a circle, and every seat was full except the one clearly meant for me, directly across from my father. Darvin sat stiff, his hands on his knees, eyes fixed on me. Mr. Keating, the family's attorney, was beside him with a folder on his lap. Orvin was slouched in his chair, scrolling on his phone like he had someplace better to be. No one offered me coffee. No one smiled. I sat. The metal chair legs scraped on the floor. Mr. Keating slid a document across the table toward me. This simply acknowledges your intent to sell the property for the benefit of the family, he said, his voice as smooth as glass. Before I could answer, my aunt murmured from 2 seats down, "It's what your grandfather would have wanted." I looked at her. The will says otherwise. Darvin's palm smacked the table, making the coffee cups jump. Wills can be amended in spirit, he said sharply. I stared at the page in front of me. The memorandum of agreement already had signature and date lines filled in. This wasn't a talk, it was a setup. Orvin leaned forward slightly, softening his voice. Look, you can keep the tractor. We'll even let you visit the new place we buy. You don't have to make this harder than it is. Mara's eyes brimmed with tears. Don't break this family, Talira, she whispered. Then, as if on cue, someone near the back pulled out a phone and angled it toward me, recording. The air in the room changed instantly. This wasn't just about pressuring me in private anymore. They were building a story for anyone who'd listen. Mr. Keating tapped the page. Initial here, then sign at the bottom. I could feel every pair of eyes on me, my fingers wrapped around the pen. For a moment, I let my mind drift, smelling cut hay, hearing the faint ring of the wind chime on the porch. I could almost see my grandfather's handwriting on the will. I pushed my chair back. I need a minute. Paper in hand, I stepped outside into the crisp air. The side door of the hall had a glass pane, and through it I caught sight of Mr. Keating's open briefcase. A paper inside was turned just enough for me to read. Orvin, Property acquisition, with a glossy photo of a condo and closing target 3 weeks scrawled underneath. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number lit the screen. Remember, we can do this without you. The weight in my chest shifted. The fatigue burned away, replaced by something sharper. Clarity. They were already spending what they thought they'd take from me. My presence here was theater. I walked back in, calm now. I won't sign a memo that pretends this is my decision, I said evenly. Darvin leaned forward. Then we'll proceed without it. Proceed however you like, I replied, my voice steady. But any transfer without my consent will be void. And this meeting, this pressure, won't look good if anyone outside this room asks how it went. Mr. Keating's expression shifted, just slightly, like he'd lost his footing. I slid the unsigned paper back across the table. Orvin muttered under his breath. You'll regret this. I stood, tucking my phone into my pocket, and walked out. On the bulletin board by the door were faded photos from old harvest fairs. Me as a kid with a blue ribbon in one hand and a slice of pie in the other. My chest tightened, but I kept moving. Outside, I pulled up a contact labeled M. Holler and pressed call. When the line clicked, I said only, we accelerate. I pulled into the driveway, the porch light was on, and my front door hung half open. The sight stopped me cold. I killed the engine and sat there for a few seconds, my hands gripping the steering wheel. That light. I knew I'd turned it off before leaving. The breeze coming off the fields seemed to slip right through me as I stepped out, scanning the yard, the shadows between the trees. I pushed the door open with my foot, half expecting someone to be standing there. Instead, the living room looked like a windstorm had ripped through it. Drawers yanked open, papers scattered across the floor. The coffee table had my old family photo album lying face down, pages bent, a picture of me as a kid peeking out like it was trying to escape. This wasn't a random mess. It was surgical. They hadn't touched the TV, my grandmother's silver frame, or even the cash jar I kept in the pantry. No, whoever had been here went for my desk. I stepped into the study, my shoes crunching over paper clips. The top drawer was wide open, my neatly filed folders tossed into piles like trash. My hand went straight to the back slot where I kept my copy of the will. Gone. Just an empty space where it should have been. But oddly, my grandfather's old leather ledger still sat there, along with the original farm survey maps. Untouched. Whoever did this knew exactly what they wanted. Then it hit me, a sharp, familiar scent in the air. That woodsy aftershave my father used since I was a teenager, the kind that lingered on his coats even in the dead of winter. I was still taking that in when a voice drifted from the hallway. Oh, hi. I turned sharply. Romy. Orvin's fiancée. She strolled out holding a crumpled envelope like it was nothing. I thought this was the electric bill, she said with a little shrug. I stared. You don't live here, she smirked, leaning against the doorway. Yet. Orvin says I should get used to it. Her tone dripped with that faux sweet confidence people get when they think they're already holding the winning hand. I took a slow breath. Put that down. Now. Instead of listening, she set the envelope on the desk like she was doing me a favor, then brushed past me toward the kitchen. That was it. I grabbed my phone and called the sheriff. 15 minutes later, Sheriff Lanning's cruiser pulled into the drive. He stepped out, hat low, the beam from his flashlight cutting across the mess. Evenin' Talira, he said evenly, but his eyes slid toward Romy, who now sat at my kitchen table sipping from a glass of my water. My father wasn't here, but his shadow was all over the room. Romy was quick to jump in. We were just helping Dad look for some property tax receipts. He was worried they'd been misplaced. The sheriff glanced at me, then back at her. Family misunderstanding, maybe? His voice was neutral, but the tilt of his head made it clear he'd already picked a side, and it wasn't mine. Misunderstanding? I said, my tone sharp enough to cut glass. Breaking into my home and rifling through my legal files isn't a misunderstanding. Lanning's mouth tightened. No signs of forced entry, and she says she was helping. I didn't bother arguing further. Pushing him would only get me more stonewalling, so instead, I leaned against the counter, let my voice go casual. Well, I'll have to let the buyer know about this break-in. People get nervous about property deals when they hear the place isn't secure. The words hung in the air. Romy's smirk flickered, and even the sheriff looked at me like he wasn't sure if I was bluffing. I didn't blink. A minute later, Lanning told us all to cool off and walked Romy out. I locked the door the moment their taillights disappeared. Then I moved quickly. The flash drive with all my scanned documents, bank statements, legal copies, correspondence, went into a Ziploc bag, then into the flour tin in the back of the pantry. It wasn't foolproof, but it would buy me time. I sat at the kitchen table, typed out a quick text to M. Holler. Change of plan. Meet tomorrow before they try again. Before I could hit send, my phone buzzed. A new message lit the screen. Tomorrow's too late. The locks. My phone buzzed with a single line. Tomorrow's too late. I didn't sleep much after that. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Romy in my kitchen, her smug smile hovering like she'd already picked out curtains for a place she didn't own. By the time the first faint light crept across the ceiling, I was already dressed, coffee in a travel mug, keys in hand. The roads were quiet that early on a Sunday. Just me, the fog, and the steady hum of tires on pavement. Highway 19 felt longer than usual, the white lines blurring in and out of the mist. I kept replaying that message in my mind, wondering who had sent it. The buyer? Someone close to him? Or was it meant to scare me into making a mistake? The diner sat just past the county line, the kind of place that never really sleeps. Inside, the air smelled of bacon and strong coffee, and the only sounds were the clink of plates and the low murmur of a couple truckers in the corner. Holler was already there, sitting in a back booth with a manila envelope resting on the table like it weighed 100 pounds. His eyes scanned the room before he gestured for me to sit. "No small talk today," he said, sliding the envelope across the table. "You should know who you're dealing with." I pulled it closer, the paper warm from his hands. Inside were photocopies, old articles, case filings, even a grainy headshot of a man in a dark suit. Holler tapped the photo. "Retired federal land commissioner. Name's Franklin Voss. Knows the law inside and out, especially rural property rights. Won't be bullied, not by your family, not by anyone." For a second, I felt something I hadn't in weeks. Relief. If this man was on my side, maybe the walls weren't closing in as fast as I thought. But the more I read, the heavier it got. This wasn't someone who took things lightly. Every case in his file was a fight to the bone. Holler leaned in. "He doesn't take kindly to intimidation. If they push, he'll push harder. But he stays out of sight unless there's no other choice. If he steps in himself, it's because he's ready to end it." The words should have been comforting. Instead, they sank into me like cold water. Because my family wasn't the type to back off. We finished our coffee in silence, the hum of the diner filling the gaps. When we stepped outside, the morning air felt heavier. Holler slowed, his gaze fixed on something across the parking lot. A silver sedan sat idling under the weak glow of a street lamp, tinted windows hiding whoever was inside. My stomach tightened. Holler's voice was low, almost flat. "They're not patient anymore." I followed his line of sight, and that's when I saw it. The small dent near the rear bumper. I knew that mark. Orvin had put it there last winter, backing into Dad's trailer. "They're tracking you," Holler said. We got into my car, and sure enough, the sedan eased out a moment after we did. No speeding, no swerving, just a steady shadow in the rear view. They kept on us for miles, right up until the courthouse sign came into view. Then, just like that, they turned off. I didn't need Holler to tell me why. The property records were public. All they had to do was walk in, give the clerk a name, and find out exactly who now held the deed. By the time I pulled back into my driveway, the fog had burned off, and the sun was bright enough to make everything look normal again. But normal was long gone. I set my bag on the table, opened my laptop, and started typing an email to Franklin Voss. My fingers hovered over the keys, the words sharp and deliberate. "It's time they see your face. On our terms." I sat there for a long moment, rereading it, weighing what it meant. Once I sent this, there'd be no turning back. Finally, I hit send, finally replied. It was only 4 words. Set the meeting. Public. By Thursday afternoon, I'd run through every possible outcome in my head. The courthouse's main hall wasn't just neutral ground, it was the one place in town where no one could raise their voice without it echoing into every corner. I got there early, parking on the far side of the square, and took a slow lap around the building. I noted every entrance, every exit, every bench where someone might linger just to overhear. Inside, the marble floors caught every step I took, each click of my shoes ricocheting off the high ceilings. Sunlight spilled through the tall, arched windows, making the air feel too bright, too exposed. My heart was steady, but I could feel the edge of anticipation sharpening each breath. I kept rehearsing the same phrases in my mind, short, controlled responses, nothing they could twist. I didn't have to wait long. From the far end of the hall, a tall man in a charcoal suit began walking toward me, early 70s, broad-shouldered, with that deliberate, unhurried pace of someone used to commanding a room. I knew the face from the files Holler had given me. Robert Hale, the former federal land commissioner who had stopped more than one family from losing their land to predators in suits. "Miss Marin," he said, his voice low but carrying. He shook my hand firmly. You did the right thing reaching out. Let's keep this straightforward. Relief settled over me like a weight shifting off my chest, but it came with a thin slice of pride. Having him here meant I wasn't standing alone anymore. The heavy glass doors swung open again, and in walked Orvin, followed by Darvin. They both slowed the second they saw Hale. Orvin's jaw tightened. Darvin's eyes darted between us before he blurted out, loud enough for a clerk to look up from her desk. You tricked us! I didn't move, didn't react, just let the words hang in the air while Hale stepped forward. Gentlemen, he said, his tone even but carrying to every corner of the hall. This sale is final. It's properly recorded and protected under state property laws. Any further interference will be treated as a violation, and I will personally see that it's prosecuted. I watched the color drain from Orvin's face. For a man who had spent his whole life controlling every conversation, he suddenly had nothing to say. Hale's gaze didn't waver. You should be grateful your daughter kept this land out of the hands of developers. Most families aren't that lucky. The words hung there, heavier than anything I could have thrown at them myself. Across the hall, a few people waiting on benches began murmuring. Aunt Maris had slipped in quietly and was now standing behind me, arms crossed, her presence solid as stone. Orvin glanced at her, then back at me, but said nothing. Darvin shifted from foot to foot, his face tight, his mouth opening and closing like he couldn't decide if he was supposed to defend himself or lash out. I kept my hands folded in front of me, matching Hale's calm. This was the kind of silence I could live with, the kind that left them with nothing to twist. Eventually, Hale nodded to me and stepped toward the doors. That's all we need to say here. We walked out into the bright afternoon light. I could feel eyes on our backs, the low hum of whispers following us onto the plaza. Darvin lingered behind, then caught up just as Hale moved toward his car. His voice was low but sharp. This isn't over. I caught the twitch of his hand near his pocket, fingers brushing his phone like he was already sending a message, or recording mine. I met his stare for a long second, then turned away without a word. By the time I got back to my car, the plaza was emptying out. The courthouse doors closed with a muted thud behind me, and the air felt too still for what I knew was coming next. But when I got home, the back door was ajar, and muddy boot prints trailed straight to my desk. The door creaked as I stepped inside. My fingers tightened around my phone, the camera already rolling. The air was still, but every sound felt sharper, the hum of the fridge, the faint scrape of the door against the wall as it swung shut behind me. The trail of mud led straight past the hallway rug to my desk. I didn't need to guess whose boots had made it. Darvin's tread was always heavy, leaving that same pattern of half-worn heel and uneven edge. My pulse stayed steady, but the heat in my chest was spreading. The desk drawer hung open. I didn't have to look twice to see the empty space where the envelope had been. The one with the notarized documents, my proof, my shield, was gone. I stepped closer, and a familiar scent drifted up, a warm, earthy sweetness, edged with smoke, my grandfather's old tobacco blend. Only one person still used it, Orvin. I closed the drawer slowly, the wood clicking back into place, then turned toward the kitchen. They were waiting. Orvin leaned against the counter, one hand on the envelope like it belonged to him, Darvin standing behind him with his arms crossed, jaw tight. We can still undo this, Orvin said, his tone somewhere between a command and a plea. The farm belongs to the family. It does, I said evenly, stepping into the room. And I'm the family who owns it now. Darvin's mouth twitched, like he was holding back a smirk. Orvin straightened, holding the envelope higher, as if showing it off gave him leverage. You've made your point, he said. But this land, it's history. It's ours. It's mine, I corrected. And I'm not here to argue history. I'm here to live on it, work it, and keep it from being stripped for profit. That's what you were about to do. Before he could reply, a sharp knock hit the doorframe. Sheriff Collins stood there, his hat tucked under one arm, his eyes moving from Orvin to Darvin to me. Behind him, Aunt Maris stood with her phone still in hand. Got a call about an unlawful entry, Collins said, stepping inside. And from the looks of it, maybe a little evidence tampering. Orvin turned, his voice clipped. This is a misunderstanding. Collins didn't move. I don't misunderstand muddy boots leading into someone else's home, or a drawer pulled open without permission. Darvin stayed silent, his arms tightening across his chest. I took a step forward, closing the space between me and my father. My voice was calm, but it carried, This is the last time you come into my home uninvited. There are boundaries now, and you're going to respect them. Collins gave a single nod. Sounds fair to me. He glanced at Orvin. I suggest you both head out before this becomes something that shows up in a court file. Orvin's gaze lingered on me for a beat too long, but he set the envelope down on the table and turned toward the door. Darvin followed, his eyes fixed on the floor. The house felt bigger once they were gone, the tension lifting like a heavy curtain. Collins gave me a quiet, "Take care," before stepping out, and the screen door closed behind him. I stayed in the kitchen for a moment, letting the quiet settle. Then Aunt Maris appeared in the doorway. "Coffee?" she asked. We carried 2 mugs out to the back porch. The sun was dipping low, spilling amber light over the fields. The rows of grass swayed gently in the breeze, untouched and still mine. We didn't need to talk. The warmth of the cup in my hands and the stretch of land before me said enough. I wasn't proud of how ugly it had gotten, but I knew I'd done what had to be done. Protecting what mattered didn't mean destroying my family, it meant saving myself. I took a slow sip, watching the sky deepen. Somewhere in the distance, a bird cut across the horizon, moving steady and sure. I sometimes wonder if they ever forgave me. But I know I forgave myself.